Welcome to the World Football Summit Podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit Podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. You know, I'm a big fan of content creation in the sports industry. And one of the best in the game is undoubtedly Richard Gillis from the Unofficial Partner Podcast and newsletter. His knowledge, the guests he brings onto the show, and being able to tell things as he sees them are what I like most about the content he puts out. And it's precisely the sports content space what we focus on today, particularly podcast. So you can imagine how much I was looking forward to this conversation. I also take the opportunity to ask him about some key themes we're seeing in the industry today, such as broadcasting, data management, and fan experience. The emerging leagues in football. Yeah, this one has it all, so make sure you stick around. But before going into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we set updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. Now, nothing else from my side, let's welcome Richard Gillis. Well, Richard, after being a fan of your podcast, of your newsletter, being able to have you as a guest on the show is a great opportunity, and I want to thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the World Football Summit Podcast.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. No, that's lovely. It's lovely to sort of be asked questions, you know. you got a podcast, you ask a lot of questions, but, you know, it's nice to be on the other side.
Yeah, today we're flipping the coin a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, look forward to this. But, you know, because I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation. Before we go into it, though, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to need an introduction, but I always like to ask my guests, why did you decide to pursue a career related to football?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, we're broader than football, but there's a sort of boring history to it, which is I'm a journalist, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I used to edit a magazine called Sport Business, which is now sportbusiness.com, and it's got all sorts of digital sort of iterations, but we're talking 20 odd years ago. So that was a sort of way in to this strange world of the business of sport. And then obviously football is so central to that. So we do a lot of football. But we do cover other stuff. We got, Olympic sports and Formula One and all of those things, NFLs of this world. So that was the sort of start of it. And then I was working for various people as a journalist. And then I started getting work on the other side of the street. So I was working for agencies and I was working for sort of sponsorship brands they were employing me. So that was nice. And so I then started working for an agency. I worked for Havas in London and an agency called Cake, which was great fun. And I did it for I can't remember how long now, 4, 5, 6 years. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that, so this is 2019, we said, myself and my business partner, Sean Singleton, we said, do you know what? I think there's a space here. And I think podcasts in that world of the business of sport, it's a bit of white space. There's loads of conferences, of which, we're talking about one here today, and they're all great and they do what they do. I'm not a conference organizer, but I do think there's a spot in there for podcasts and newsletters, and that felt like a nice place that I would feel comfortable doing, but also I thought that, the audience would enjoy. So that was our bit. That was our sort of moment. And again, we've just had our 5th birthday, which is extraordinary actually to think about that.
And how much you've grown over those 5 years, no?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, Richard, what is it that you enjoy most about podcasting and in general, just creating content around the sports industry?
I think it's so compared to being, obviously as a journalist, you write for a living and you're writing and then the audience reads it and they like it or don't like it or they ignore it or are bored by it or whatever it is. But with podcasts, I think it's a much more intimate medium. You're in their ear. And so I've always liked interviewing. And I always thought that when I was working as a sort of traditional journalist, it always felt like a feature or an article was sort of just a small fraction of what had happened. So you meet people, you have a chat, you record stuff, and then you pick out some quotes. And it didn't feel like, okay, actually there was so much more. That person was so much more interesting, funnier, more cynical, more, real than you can sort of convey in a feature. So I remember thinking, I used to get loads of, when in the days of tapes, I used to tape recording, conversations. And I used to think, yeah, this is, it was, people should hear this, but obviously there wasn't a medium. So podcasts are sort of, I always think it's the conversation that I really enjoy. I've always enjoyed. And it's that bit of it, which I think is what podcasts are about. I always say that whenever I hear something I know about being talked about in a news program or, on the radio or on television, or even written in a newspaper, they quite often get it wrong, or they are so superficial as to be uninteresting, so you know what this like when people talk about European football, the business of European football, it's superficial. It's quite often flawed in some way, or you think, oh, you could have done that better. So I think podcasts are really good at niches, and they get, if you can capture an audience or just present something that takes people deeper into the conversation with people that know what they're talking about, that's always going to be interesting. So it's trying not to be boring, but also just ask interesting questions. That's, what I've always seen as the job. And the feedback you get is much more personal than it ever was as a written journalist. Because people, as I say, I think people just, you're in their ear in the gym, walking along the dog, on the train, whatever it is. So it's quite interesting. And when people hear or talk to you in real life, feedback's really nice. It's always quite, well, most of it is quite, it's nice and warm, and you have a nice relationship. So I like it. I like that perspective.
If I had been asked that question, I think I would have replied the exact same thing, because it's about the conversation and about just really deciding on a topic and just going deep into the topic, because you can do it in one episode, several, bring in different people or the same people. I've brought the same guest several times, as so have you. And about the positive or negative feedback, the good thing is if you don't like it, you don't listen to it. So
yeah,
people that
it's quite a brutal medium in that way. You sort of think, okay, I'm not, you just turn it off. And yeah, no, I agree. I also think that one of the things that I always want to do is actually have a conversation rather than a series of questions. Again, you get sort of it can be a bit confrontational. If you've got someone for 6 minutes on the radio in the morning, or on a news program, you get adversarial, and again, it's really boring because people go into a sort of defensive comms mode. So it's trying to nudge people out of that and try just to have a human conversation, just so, and respond to them in the moment, rather than, okay, I've got this list of questions, I'm going to fire these questions at you, And it's, again, when you listen to politicians or famous sports people or actors, when they've been interviewed a lot, they go into a sort of, they're just anecdote machines. They just bring out these same stories or pre-prepared lines, and it's really boring to listen to. So trying not to do that, I think, is important.
Yeah, but ironically, the ones that have the most authentic conversations are usually the most popular episodes. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's people out there listening, and they just want to be part of the conversation. If it's kind of like scripted all the time, you can tell, so.
You can tell. And also if you can appear, if you can appear to have an authentic conversation, if you are a politician who sounds like a normal person, then you become very popular very quickly. And that's not always a good thing, because, you can see it in Donald Trump. Donald Trump is someone, he connects to people. He can be the worst person in the world, but he's actually broken that idea of what a traditional politician sounds like. And you can see that in every sphere, that if you can come across as a human being, you are going to sort of gain quite a lot of, kudos from that. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. I think it says as much about the way the media has evolved and particularly television and mainstream radio is as it does for anything else. I think podcasts are a good anecdote for that, but they are changing. You know this. Podcasts are becoming bigger. They're becoming a bit more like radio.
Yeah.
And so I find them less interesting as a result of that.
I was going to ask you, because the podcast space, while it has been present, it's still, some numbers say that it's going to grow from like to 21% until like 2030, 32. But when you look at sports podcasts, they're only like 8% of the market. And still it feels sometimes saturated, and we're only at 8%. So, those are numbers. So I don't know if you have like a more qualitative view of how you've seen the space evolve. And also my sense is that the sports business podcast space has grown so much. I don't know if you feel the same, and if you feel, and if that's the case, why do you think that's grown so much?
So there's two things there. The first one is about podcasts more generally. I think that the numbers, I've seen the same numbers and, the projections and the size of the market. I think in a sort of, the vast majority of that is a B2C conversation. So it's a consumer marketplace. And there will be a few very big winners in that. So it's the Joe Rogan thing, So if you've got a big audience, you're making a lot of money from advertising on a CPM basis, which is fine. And there is it's a very cutthroat marketplace. Each sector will have a few very, very big shows, and the big will get bigger. And so I think that's just the way in which that, the media market evolved. I think to your second point about the business of sport, yes, there are, quite a few podcasts now that are out there. And it's just, we've noticed over the 5 years of of our existence that there's been an influx of organizations having a go, in various guises. You've also got individuals starting their own, and it's fine, that's great, because I think it's actually, if you can be the best in your little bit of the world, then I think you'll do okay. That's what we always think about, and trying to say, right, okay, let's just do we've got an audience, we've grown, it grows quite slowly. So it's not a viral medium, I don't think. It's quite hard to make it sort of jolt in terms of or spike in terms of listenership, because it's so much about behavior and habit and trust that you have to build up over time. So, and you have to keep going. We've been doing 2 a week for 5 years. So I think you have to just, it's quite relentless from that perspective. So, which gets back to, you have to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And because if you don't, you'll just run out of road ultimately. Yeah. If it's a sort of, if it's just a way of marketing yourself, it's like people who write books or whatever, just to give themselves a platform. They're not interested in writing the book. It's just a marketing platform. And I think actually, if you don't intrinsically enjoy what you're doing, then ultimately you'll sort of blow out at some point. But there's some great ones around, and I think it's great that the more people, the sports business is a sort of microcosm of the broader society. So the more people who will listen, you still got a lot of people who don't listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
So the more they are educated in terms of just listening to podcasts on a regular basis, the more people that will come to us, and if we're any good, they'll stay with us. And if we're not, they won't. And that's how things work.
Yeah, it's a medium that rewards consistency, as you said. But I would say that once you get a fan of podcasts to follow you, I would argue that they're going to keep with you for a long time. Whereas where you see in other mediums, you might see people dropping off, more regularly. Yes, you get that spike, in growth, but you can also get that spike in, number of users going down. I think
you can. I think it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I find myself, I've got like at any one time a group of podcasts that I listen to, and then I'm, some things might drop off, and I might pick up new ones. And there's probably about 7 or 8 that I'm listening to on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
And so, and the reasons for listening are probably vary as well. There are some that I just want to listen to on a, Sunday morning, where I want to, might be a history podcast. It might be absolutely nothing to do with the day job, or, it could be a comedy podcast, it could be a comedian I like or whoever. And then you've got the ones that, okay, I'm going to have to listen to this. You might listen to it on double time or time and a half. So it speeds up. So it's just a download of information. You get that on sort of more news related things. And one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is, and you'll have a view on this as well, in terms of where the space is in our little world. And I think that, a sort of shorter form, there might be a space that might be something that would be worth looking at, or there might be a more obviously news related. We've always said, right, let's do something that you could listen to in a year's time. It will still be relevant. You make it sort of evergreen, use the cliche. But there are sort of other things that you could then bring out, which just talk to different, or serve other behaviors in the audience.
Yeah, I think it's a medium that also context plays such a big role. Because as you said, it's not the same when I'm walking home, when I'm listening to some podcast where I can be just focused. Whereas if I'm doing whatever chore I'm doing at home and I just need something that kind of like is with me,
Yeah.
I don't need to be as focused. And also even the day, I already know like on Wednesdays, what podcast I'm going to listen to, on Thursdays, on Fridays, you know what I mean? So there's always that, there's so many elements to it. So it's a complex medium. But again, once you make that routine and that habit, it's really, really hard to lose that, So
yeah, I think there's something, you get so one of the things again we sort of wrestle with a bit is the social media sort of outreach. So once you've got a podcast, obviously, then you're not short of advice.
yeah.
People quite often come in, you should be doing this, you should be doing that,
Oh, yeah.
And they quite so what are you doing on TikTok or YouTube or, and what about video? And obviously the platforms find podcasts irritating because they can't monetize them as easily as they can video. So there's an incentive to turn every podcast into a video. And I think I get it from a marketing point of view that it's a sort of, visual top of the funnel conversation. But I do think you lose essentially the essence of what I like about podcasts. If, I'm not going to sit and watch a video of it. And I know that that's not the point. I think it's just a flag to get you to listen. But I do sometimes think actually I like, the reason we did it was I've always liked radio and I like audio and I like, I think there's so much you can do within this medium. And there's only so many hours in the day, and there is only, there's two of us, but also we've got a small business, group of people that help us. But you got to make decisions in terms of where you spend your time, and do I want to spend a lot of time creating TikTok videos of my face? And the answer I can tell you with some confidence is no. No, I don't want to do that.
And you mentioned the space is changing, which it is. Are there any trends or anything you're keeping an eye out for that's worth mentioning or no?
I think there's, again, some of it will be an adaptation of what is elsewhere. Again, in our little world of the the business of sport, in our little bubble, I think there's loads of space for narrative podcasts, story-led audio productions. I think that would be interesting. We've dipped our toe into short series. So we did the Pirates versus the Premier League, which is about illegal streaming. And that's one that the numbers on, the listenership is quite interesting because it's different than the traditional unofficial partner audience, which is quite, industry focused most of the time. But obviously, and you'll find this as well, is that there are some subjects at certain moments which break out into football Twitter, or you get passed around other audiences, which is great for the ego. The number is goes up, it's enormous, but not many of them stay around for, a in-depth conversation about, data.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there thinking, hang on, what this is about illegal streaming. So there's a sort of crossover there, which again, I think there's just loads of interesting areas that so series, I think news, the delivery of news is again, could be interesting. I was quite interested in when we had that moment of, Clubhouse live audio, I thought that was going to be more, it might come back in some shape or form. And obviously got Twitter Spaces, but I never bother myself. I'm always a bit worried that if I sort of try and bring anything out, which I don't do myself, you know what I mean? Because I just don't have got the confidence in it. And I remember going on Clubhouse thinking, God, this is going to be the new thing. And it was just the most annoying thing ever.
Yeah.
Just people talking, really unedited. And it was like LinkedIn on, audio LinkedIn. It was just unbearable. Just people promoting themselves and, talking about laddering up and down the funnels and, just all the marketing cliches that come into it. So yeah, but I thought the idea of it was quite interesting. There was a moment where I thought actually it would be quite good to sort of ambush a conference or ambush something or an event and then run a sort of alternative commentary over the top of it, whether you'd get away with it or not. I've always thought ambushing the Sport Industry Awards would be quite a good idea. But, because it's there's loads in there, but I don't think I'd get away with it. Nick Keller would probably sue me or something.
Yeah, I always wonder, I mean, if for example, the future is more about fragmentation. So for example, we're going to have a relatively long conversation, but we're going to touch different topics.
Yeah.
So is it a matter of rather than just having a show published once a week, we publish this conversation throughout different, like 20-minute slots around the rest of the week. So, on Monday we talk about podcasting, and then on Wednesday people are going to hear us talking about the industry, and it's just a way to kind of like have the same content but distributed differently.
And the other one is the other way is stupidly long.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. We've listened to them actually, it's several times, but you never know. It really depends. Again, it's context. It's depending on whatever else you listen to or what topic.
I think that's a bit to do with, so the sort of YouTube has become more significant as a podcast channel. And it's what people have got on, while they're working. So again, if you're going for, it's like Twitch, things are just on. It's like radio, just things are on. If you're doing that for 3, 4, 5 hours, it's a thing. I don't want to do it, but it's you can see that actually it just fits into people's day, or you don't. Sometimes you don't want to think and make these decisions here. So much content, so many things to actually decide. What box set am I watching tonight? We just finished Shogun on, which is fantastic, and now we're sort of, what are we doing next? And there's like a just constant decision making in terms of what's good. I don't want to waste my time on. I don't want to waste an evening watching a crap show. I think it's similar to podcasting. There is a sort of, you need to have trust that the thing is going to be worthwhile.
And one of the things I'm looking out for is a more, call it sports organizations or even players going into the space. And the only reason being is it's a medium, as you said, it's a great way to connect with fans in a time where everybody in the industry is looking to, how can I create, more content to connect with fans directly, D2C, blah, blah, blah. And also, as you said at the beginning, it helps them really control the message rather than just being on another medium. So I'm thinking, well, this is a space that everybody understands. And for them, it's ideal. And it's not hard to set up. At the end of the day, it's consistency, but it's not a technical thing that you need to set up. So do you think that's going to be the case where you see more players, which you're already seeing in the American sports industry, really, and more teams just setting up their own podcast?
I think so, but I think there's a couple of caveats, which is they've got to be interesting. And one of the problems is that, athletes tend to be, and whisper it, a bit dull because they haven't got much life experience outside of training and doing sport. So it's got to be interesting to listen to. And so there's a sort of production bit of it. There's also the famous ones are so rich, why would they bother? There's a question of, it's do I want to, because you've got to do it frequently to have any impact. And so are they going to then want to turn up to a studio or just do it, and you think, if they're that rich, and why would they bother? Unless they've got a massive ego that they want to be out there and, talking all the time to their audience. I sort of get it. It's one of those that I get intellectually, but I wonder about the quality of it, but also the incentive. And sometimes you get, people at the end of their career. So over here in the UK, you've got Peter Crouch, and he's a really good talker. He's really funny. So it's sort of Andy's at the end of his career, so he's not, it's not, he hasn't got anything else to do, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And he's made a really good job of becoming a sort of influencer type creator.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure other people, and there are examples, but the barriers are also quite significant, I think, because you've only got so many Peter Crouch type people who, funny enough. The danger is you get someone like Joey Barton, again, it's a UK reference, but so he set himself up, ex-footballer.
Yeah.
And he's gone, the sort of lowest common denominator route of just slagging off women's football or whatever, just setting out as it's really boring, but trying desperately to have some sort of relevance. And I can see that happening as well. So I think podcasts are sort of like a microcosm of the broader, thing. And I think that, the sports people, there's lots of case studies of good ideas of athlete-centered content which have floundered because, one, they're really boring, and secondly, just hasn't sustained. And, it's a nice idea that it's sort of looking for, it's a sort of solution looking for a problem, really.
I think this is a good segue to a conversation I wanted to have with you about, in general, the sports industry, because there's so many changes going on. And, you have your traditional sport business model, and you have your pillars. You have your match day, you have your commercial, you have your broadcasting. But I'm wondering, is content the next pillar that's gonna help elevate the sport business model, or not? Do you think we're gonna keep on seeing the classics there?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a live question. We did a podcast at the event in Madrid, so with the ECA, the European Club Association, and that's very much front of mind in terms of, what happens when the media money gets turned off, or if it does, and or in and where it has been turned off, where the model is very different, because we focus a lot, and over here in the UK, obviously we talk about the Premier League ad nauseum, which is just a freak in terms of its success, in terms of the media rights income that it generates, and that's been cascaded down into the clubs, and it's created sort of 20 odd years or 30 years of a really compelling football product, entertainment product, and there's lots of arguments about where the money's gone and how they should spend it. But you have then got this basic issue, which again is every European club is facing, is first of all, what happens if that money runs out and the TV companies, the bundle gets sort of it doesn't sustain as a model, or we stop paying subscriptions. But then the other thing is the other revenue sources. A lot of it is looking at sort of incremental improvement. So things like match day or sponsorship, merchandise. These are sort of areas where it's difficult to sort of see a massive leap.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions that we asked in Madrid was, what's the next big leap? So if you said, right, okay, I need to increase revenue by 20, 30, 40%, well, I need to find 100 million rather than 5, 10 million here and there. What would you do? And the question then becomes, I think it's quite a big question for football and for sport generally, is actually, what are you? So you've got a lobby, a group of one audience which says, well, this is football club as Netflix, or, it's content. Create content, be like Ryan Reynolds, create documentaries, make your club famous outside, off the pitch, as well as on. And there is a virtuous circle. You'll win promotion, more money, big global sponsors on a local football team shirt. And that's a story which I know is very compelling for lots of clubs, and they're trying in different guises to try and do that. So it's content, what I call football as, club as Netflix. You've also got the other model, which is the sort of data question, which I call club as Amazon, which is make your club easier and better, make more money from the commercial side. So take the fan relationship and escalate it to the sort of relationship I have with Amazon. So they know me better than I know myself. They're serving me stuff that I didn't know I needed. They do it with, a seamless operation.
Yeah.
And all of that obviously takes billions and billions of dollars. So, and probably 20 years. So it's try to work out, okay, is that the route? Are you then going to turn a fan into a customer in that way? So you're looking at a sort of the way in which we look at football clubs. And then the third thing is, what about just being a football club? And by that, I mean, getting footballers in, trading, making money on, football trading. I live in Brighton on the south coast of England, and Brighton found a central midfielder and sold him to Chelsea for 100 million, and they made almost, I think they bought him for 10. Yeah. So, and they would argue they did that from sophisticated data analytics and performance data and use of that sort of insight, which again, that's one route. So you've got these other sort of ways in which to generate revenue if you're a football club owner. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important because actually it depends on what you think you are when you get up in the morning. So if you are, if you wake up and you say, right, I'm a content house, I'm a media company, you'll make decisions for the long term based on that. And that's where you'll spend your money, and that's where you're framing the world. And if you think it's the customer relationship, fan as, Amazon customer, then I think that's another route, but it's a different route, and it makes different decisions, and you require different people in the organization to make that work. So again, it's quite interesting in terms of how these things will play out. And then you've also, the last point on that is, I think the arms race in football is data, and whether that's commercial data, but particularly performance data. So the big clubs can afford huge, so Man City has got a suite of data analytics people who are scouring the world for, players and looking at incremental improvements in the players that they've got. It takes a lot of money, time. Relatively few clubs will be able to afford and keep up with that. But all the time, Man City, PSG, Real, Bayern, these are clubs that will increase every year. And so if you're a smaller club or even a mid-level club, you're thinking, well, how do I keep up with that? Because I can't afford that game. That's a game. So the technology is going to be a competitive advantage. And the question for the people who run sport is, do you let that happen? Mm-hmm. It's like it's always been the case that more money brings prizes, but it's a question of saying, well, are we okay with that? Is that just going to, is it financial doping or data doping or whatever? So is it unfair that some clubs were going to have a considerable advantage because of off the field behaviors and money, basically?
Yeah. But I guess that's something that you see across all industries, right? Bigger companies invest more in more technology. The smaller companies don't have as many resources, as many access to talent. So I don't know if that's a dynamic that you're seeing across the entire world, really, where the bigger are just getting bigger and the smaller are just getting more squeezed. No?
Well, I think there's also, you're absolutely right. And the question is, this gets to the sport and business question, is in terms of, is sport a controllable world in a way that other industries aren't? If it's the car industry, it doesn't matter. Car companies, will succeed or fail. It matters, in terms of employment or whatever, but you can't do anything about that really in a global industry. With sport, the question is, can you can you control it centrally? And there are lots of people who say, well, what about the American market? Yes, they can do it. They can, Formula One can restrict the use of data and to level the playing field. So what can or does football in Europe want to make those decisions? And that's a really pressing question, because time is going to move on, and you're going to get the gap between big and even big and middle is going to escalate based on money and intelligence, and all of that will you get to a Super League scenario by stealth, because actually you're just going to have a separation between the haves and have-nots, which is happening anyway. But all the conversations that you hear below the very top level is, well, how can we keep up? It's going to be, if not impossible, then what can the football industry do? Are they happy with this direction of travel? Because otherwise, or will ultimately the product start to fail?
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, if, to a point you made earlier, could the solution be simpler? Meaning, the football industry wants to grow. If you want to grow, really, it's by acquiring new customers or getting the ones that you have and to spend more. Is it just a matter of investing more in marketing? Because there was one outstanding episode that you guys published with the data that something was like, it said that the average American team was investing I think it's 11% of the revenues in marketing. Whereas when you go into football, the EPL, the biggest football league was only not even getting to 2%. What happens if these teams start to just invest in marketing? Is that a solution?
Yeah, that was Andrew Umbers, who was the founder of Oakwell Capital.
Mm-hmm.
He made that point. Yeah, it's a really interesting, stark difference just in terms of the amount of money that's spent. Again, it depends on how you define what marketing spend is and how what classifies as marketing spend. But I don't know. I think there's a if you transfer this into the women's game, I think we're again in a really interesting moment where there is a lobby to say, okay, do you control the game?
Mm-hmm.
Does the centre have more control over the next 10 years of the women's game? Or do you let the market free and just, that's always been the sort of European way? And again, sentimentally, I am incredibly in favour of pyramids, promotion, relegation, with the appearance of a meritocracy. But actually, we know it's not a meritocracy because money is not meritocratic. There are real barriers. And so if you assume that small clubs can rise through in a sort of Leicester type way, that's an anomaly. That isn't normal. So we all want that romantic story. That's why we have the leagues that we do. But same with the financial fair play questions in terms of there is money and also technology is creating barriers to entry into the sort of very top end. Mm-hmm. And money's always been there, but the tech bit is probably new, I say relatively new over the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. So there is something there that could be fundamentally different now than it was in the past.
Yeah, but also I was having this conversation or similar one with Roy Mitchell on podcast.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of weeks ago. And
whatever happened to him?
Not a great podcast that everybody here listening should follow. And we were just talking about how we're in we belong to a generation that actually values the legacy of the game, and promotion and relegation and, merit. Are we shifting to a world where the new generation of fans actually value more the entertainment side of it? Meaning that would justify or would see the case for something like a Super League going on, I don't know if we're shifting to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I get the arguments. So the entertainment thing, I think one of the most interesting things I've seen recently, and I'm now going to forget the guy's name, but in terms of the way in which just the market for entertainment is evolving. And we talk about sport as entertainment as though that's an aspiration. Meanwhile, TikTok is ruining various areas of entertainment, film, gaming. It's going after gaming now. So you've got this addiction question, which is inherent in, again, the social media platforms. And all the assumptions of turning sport into an entertainment product in a WWE type style, I think is a 25-year-old argument. I think that actually the platforms have won. And there is a very real danger that if you turn, and the defense that sport has in this world where everything is entertainment, everything is just scroll, then what are sport's strengths in that? Rather than saying, let's be less like sport and more like Dancing on Ice or WWE or, let's not do that. Let's go the other way and focus much more on what sport is, what makes it unique, rather than trying to turn it into a sort of baking competition with football boots, because that way there's not much hope that way either. So these are bigger questions, and I think sport is, and we're all romantics about it, but there is something fundamentally different. I get it in terms of if it's presented as entertainment, but if you're trying to turn the core product into entertainment, then I don't think that's the right way.
Yeah.
Because also you're creating the real marketing problem, which is that you are creating a product that you don't know there's any audience for. You're taking it and making it less interesting to your core audience in the hope of some sort of new, younger audience will buy it. And you have no evidence to suggest that that's the case because you're getting incredibly competitive marketplace. So I think there's going to be there has to be a recalibration of the money. Ultimately, it might take less money in terms of, in the gate, but you'll still have a product that people want to listen to. Now, again, that sounds absurdly naive in the context of billions and billions of pounds and dollars being put into sport and changing it. And you've got Saudi money coming in and you've got American markets, all of these things. But ultimately, when you come down to it, I think there is a danger of turning, that you think that sport is just another entertainment category.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous.
It is. And actually the guys at the Are You Not Entertained podcast, they had a good point, which is it's not the same when you see sport being entertaining than being considered entertainment. You know what I mean? It's not the same thing. And I think to what you just mentioned right now, alluding to the Saudi money, the role that the MLS is playing, at least today, you see that soccer, you will, quote unquote, soccer is becoming embedded in the culture. How do you see it? Do you see them actually impacting significantly the football industry with the way they perceive the sport or not?
Oh, it definitely will. I mean, it will impact on across the board. And I find it interesting. It's, again, you're sort of trying to get a perspective beyond the sort of cliches of between sports washing and or, nation building of, why they're doing it, what they're trying to do. I think it's interesting comparing football, what they do in football with golf and tennis and the other big bets that they've made in terms of the market. I think they've made some mistakes in golf, which, I don't think Live Golf has worked in the way that they thought it was going to work. I think tennis, there's a real danger with both of golf and tennis that they're overpaying for the middle of the market. So, and that's in the hope that they're going to, or in the, the calculation that they're going to then sort of reimagine the ATP or the WTA tours or the golf tours. And it might work, but ultimately you're leaving the top end of the market to sort of thrive, at least in the short term. So the Masters and the Grand Slams and the majors of this world. So if you transpose that into football is slightly, is always different. And I don't know. So it's a rare, the Saudi Premier League, you've got the World Cup. And so I think I'm more interested in, their relationship with FIFA, I think is fascinating and will be incredibly important to keep an eye on. And what, why FIFA are doing what they're doing, both in the men's and the women's games, new tournaments, power struggles between FIFA, UEFA, the clubs, all, more games, players, shortening careers, all of that sort of stuff, which football is not short of money. So another injection of money into the top of FIFA doesn't, is that going to make much difference? I think across the sports industry, the thing we've learned the last 30 years is that a lot of these things aren't very good businesses,
Yeah.
And so just giving them more money it's not going to produce optimum sort of outcomes. So, don't know. We'll see, but looks like it's going to happen, doesn't it? It looks like that's the direction of travel. But and the other bit is that quite often what sports marketing is just creating more stuff. So more events, more tournaments, more teams, because that's the easiest way of generating more money, just to, build more things without actually thinking hard about the other things, which could, about scarcity, which is, again, you sound absurdly naive talking about scarcity, creating scarcity in the sports marketplace when people are offering billions of pounds for a new tournament. That's what people do.
Yeah, but that's where you see the NFL, no? They base the model on scarcity, and look at them. This stat goes, the credit goes to Joe Pompliano. He said something like, the NFL generates more revenue than the big five European football leagues combined. And,
and the IPL. Again, it's both obvious and easy to say, but the Super League, the response to the Super League proved it ain't as easy as that in execution. So it's they could close a European league, or they could close the Women's League, or the world, the FIFA's new Women's World Club Championship in 26 could be a sort of super club closed league. But is that what the audience wants? And, to our earlier point, we don't really know.
Yeah. And I want to see, I've been having this internal debate recently, and I want to see your opinion on this, because I've asked this to several people. You see the industry very much focused on turning fans into customers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where all this conversation around monetizing the fan and all that comes into play, right? But when you look at other industries, they want to do the exact opposite thing, meaning turning their customers into fans. The difference is that, and this is an example I've alluded to before, you're a Tottenham fan.
Yep.
If Tottenham loses, you don't change teams. Whereas, I don't know, whatever product you can think of, your car, you mentioned the car. If your car breaks, probably you're not buying your car at that same brand. So why is that? Why shouldn't we just focus on, okay, we have fans. Why don't we just create value for them and then capture value for them, rather than just thinking of them as customers? I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know what your take on it.
I think, I remember who we had on. We're talking about the words we use to describe that relationship. So we, football calls them fans. Mobile phones call them users. Like drug dealers call their customers users. And I think the word is both not important, but also very important. I think it's quite revealing, and there's it's interesting. There's still a sensitivity about calling football fans customers, and I think that's probably right. I think it is a line that you need to be careful with, because it's not just it's not just another marketing relationship. It talks back to the point we were saying earlier about the sport. It's not just entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this extra bit to it, which you have to. It's really easy. It's really inconvenient, and it's messy, and it's a pain in the arse. If you're working at a football club, you want to just think of them as customers, but they're not.
No,
we should caveat that with the relationship looks more like a customer relationship, in international global markets. So I think they're more the fans are more promiscuous in terms of choosing between basically successful clubs, in a way that, that you'll have your fan, your football club. I've got Tottenham. Sometimes wish it wasn't, but that's what I'm stuck with. So that's different than fans in America or fans in other countries. I think there is it's less of a traditional fan relationship, and it starts to look a lot more like I'm a customer of Apple, or I'm a customer of Samsung, or and there is a sort of certain amount of loyalty there. There's a tie-in, but it's not quite the same. But then when you talk to the commercial people on the side, football clubs, they're saying, well, actually, the latter are spending much more money, trying to get money out of a season ticket holder. So if you're a season ticket holder, season tickets are really quite hard at the big clubs. They're like, you have to inherit them because people aren't moving. So again, there's no great jumps to be made other than just putting the price up each time, which always comes with a massive reputation hit. The fans obviously hate it, and they feel exploited by the football club. But there's no way of how do you get more money out of 60,000 people coming and watching a game on a Saturday?
Yeah.
And the number of people who are coming from overseas, they're there for different reasons. They're not just, this is another Saturday, I've walked to the stadium like a local fan or got the train. They've flown in from another country. They're on holiday. They're spending multiple amounts of money in the stadium. They're buying the shirts. So it's balancing that, because again, the unsaid thing, or things people don't say on podcasts from football clubs, is, what if we had half the stadium were global fans, and we'd make much, much more money.
Actually,
go take that, go sell that to the local fan group.
Yeah, that's a conversation I also had with Roger on the show, and with Peter Moore, former CEO at Liverpool.
Yeah.
I actually heard him in another podcast say that, during his time at Liverpool, it was the international fan who had higher lifetime value. So again, and that's why he coined the phrase that was something like, a team has to have a local heart and a global pulse, meaning that, at the end of the day, it's your community that's going to hold things together. But maybe the opportunity is more on the international fan. Again, how do you balance that it's very tricky,
Yeah. That's why Peter's on a higher salary than I am. He's got a better marketing spiel.
and definitely higher than mine too. Anyway, Richard, this has been a very fun conversation, but I just had a few additional questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And you talked about Tottenham. Actually, I usually ask many of my guests this question, but I think given your unique case, I'm going to let you decide between one of the following two questions I'm going to ask you, which is, first one, either you can go back in history, you have unlimited budget, and you can acquire any player in history for Tottenham. Who would that be?
Johan Cruyff.
Okay, that was quick. All right. Actually, my dad would have
we would ruin him, but it would be lovely to have him there. But yes, that would be the answer to that one.
Well, you had Modric, he was the creation Johan Cruyff back in the day,
Did, and I'm old enough to remember Gilis who was a fantastic player as well. So he, but Cruyff was I loved Cruyff when I was a kid. We all wanted to be Cruyff in the playground.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, he would be the hero. He's like a film star, but he's also, best player.
And would it be him who would you like to have also on the show, or is there another sports industry leader you would have liked to have on the show?
Alive or dead?
You can choose.
Okay, so I think it would be. I never interviewed Mark McCormack, and that would be really interesting.
Oh, that would be nice.
I interviewed Arnold Palmer once, and I remember it was in Wales at some really rubbish golf event, and I couldn't work out why he was there, but it was. And he was incredible, because he was I was moaning about driving to the ground, and he'd flown his own jet, and he was really old at this point. So McCormack, that bit would be really interesting. Horst Dassler is another one I'd love to have talked to, because there's some tales there. It's a great, all of that. We've had Patrick Nally on talking about those old days, and he was in the room with Horst Dassler when it was all getting going in the sort of 60s and 70s. But yeah, him and then going back, Walter Hagen in the 20s, golfer. But there's loads. I could go on for ages. But
who knows, Richard? Maybe with the artificial intelligence, you might have them on the show soon enough. No, you never know.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not a bad shout.
Anyway, Richard, and one final question, at least from my side, is this year, World Football Summit, we launched a rebrand. And basically, we believe that the football industry needs to become more professional. We believe it needs to embrace innovation and also adopt sustainability as a priority. And when I speak about sustainability, I speak of it from the three pillars, which is financial, social, and environmental. Now, all of this, we summed it up into a claim that we said the football we want and the football we need. So if I were to ask you, like in 1-2 sentences, about the football you want or the football you need, how would you do it?
Blimey. I think I'm, again, this might be sort of purposely contrarian, but I think the rush to professionalize, I'm always a bit nervous about. I've got a sense, because actually what happens is that you create barriers to entry. You make it more difficult for people who could do it, you layer in qualifications. You'll need a degree to work at a football club. I don't think you do. I think so. Just on that bit of it, on the business side of it, I always quite resist the rush to professionalizing sectors, because I think actually you just cut people out in terms of accessibility. It's not done on purpose, but I think that's one of the reasons for it. And then, so the football I want, the football I need, I want entertaining, cheap football. I want Spurs to be successful, and I want England to win the Euros. The football I need. You know what? I'm not sure I need football anymore. There was a time you could have asked me that question a while ago. I don't need football. I was thinking over the weekend, the Champions League. I didn't watch the Champions League final because it's on TNT. It's just another subscription that that's the subscription too far. I don't get it. I've not followed the Champions League for a while because of that. I see it on TikTok. I see it on YouTube clips, completely out of context. And then you turn around and you find that actually I don't care who wins. So that's where I am with football. It's a love-hate relationship. And so I want it to be better, but I don't think I need it anymore.
Wow. It's an interesting take. Thank you for that.
Sorry if that's, goes against the brand, but I think that's where I am.
No, actually, that is part of the brand, because at the end of the day, maybe football we want or we need doesn't exist at this point. Maybe it needs to evolve,
So much of it exists in my imagination as well. My relationship with football is so based on nostalgia, and it's so little to do with actually what's happening today. I don't, and it might be, this is a conversation I have with friends, is that I'm not sure whether it's because I've worked in and around football, I've fallen out of love with it, or because I'm older than I've ever been. And I've just grown out of it, but I don't know. But I sense occasionally though, it draws me back in. Occasionally, I think suddenly something happens and you get excited again. But those moments are fewer.
I appreciate the honesty, and that's actually, in all honesty, myself, that's why I'm a big fan of the content you put out, because you see things and you tell them how you see them, and that's why I like it. So I appreciate that, and that you took this, you brought this over to the show. So thanks for that. And Richard, I don't know, I've had so much fun, but I was wondering if you have any last words you wanted to share with the audience. Where can people, if they don't know it yet, where can people find your podcast or your newsletter?
Yeah, well, we're always, you go to unofficialpartner.com, you'll find us, or we're on Apple and all the usual places. If people have got ideas for podcasts, get in touch. We're 5 years in. We're always interested in new things, new ideas, new voices. Just give me a shout. And if it's a good one, we'll respond.
Amazing. Well, Richard, thank you so much again for making the time, for sharing all the knowledge, and hopefully, we'll bring you back someday and keep on seeing how the industry is evolving.
Not at all. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Richard. Have a good day.
Cheers.
And there you have him, Richard Gillis. Wow, that was interesting to have him on the show after listening to him so many times on the podcast. It's just a weird feeling of, listening to his voice. But overall, I just had an amazing time. And some of the takeaways from the conversation, I guess, include is just the ever-changing landscape of content at the end of the day. So you see podcasting increasing, and you see new forms of trying to get to customers. Overall, I agree with his take on it, which is that podcasting is a great medium to just have a different type of relationship with fans and whoever follows you. And by the way, I want to thank you guys for listening, because it is a different type of connection that you feel. But I guess I'm wondering if content overall, and this is something we discussed, is going to become a pillar of the sports business model, because you kind of have to try different things. It is true with podcasting, it could be difficult because you need a lot of consistency and you need more, let's say, authentic conversations. And I felt this one with Richard was just like that, where you can actually have just, start talking about things that you see in the industry without a kind of like a message that you want to send out. But anyway, I think there's some interesting developments going on in the industry. Let's see how that evolves. Let's see if, as we've discussed with Roger Mitchell on the show, are we going into an area where people value more the entertainment side of things, or is football, the essence of football, going to keep being what it is? And that's something that we need to keep an eye out. And I think from there, you're going to see new competitions come out or not, or new content formats or not. It really just depends on what the fan wants, and especially the future fan, because he alluded to that, like how attention spans are just changing at the end of the day, and really trying to get the attention of a fan is difficult, but once you have them, who knows? But overall, I just thought, it was an interesting conversation. I don't know if there was any other takeaways that you took from it. If so, as always, make sure you reach out on social media and let us know. And before we go, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice. You share it with your industry colleagues. It does help out a lot, in trying to bring guests like Richard over to the show. And nothing else from my side. I want to thank you for tuning into another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. And hopefully you learned something new today. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.